me show you the competition.
Welcome to the top 5 Charizards in competitive Pokemon. Now, you may be wondering, why are we only ranking Charizard? Well, with the release of Generation 9, Game Freak has once again given blatant preferential treatment to the perennial fan favorite, as it is the only one of the Kanto starters announced in the upcoming Black Crystal Terra raid event for Scarlet and Violet as of this video. Which means it might be the only Kanto starter released in the beginning of the generation again. And in celebration of this, or protest, depending on how you look at it, we have decided to embrace this motto and indulge fully. Charizard is the sun we orbit around. Charizard devours universes. There is nothing else, only Charizard. Yes, we've done How Good Was Charizard actually, but we want to take things to the next level. Today on False Swipe Charizard, we present to you the top 5 Charizards of all time. And one of the biggest mons of all time is going to need one of the biggest mobile games ever, because this video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. Raid is the first game to bring a true console level experience to your phone. With hundreds of artifacts to equip and over 600 champions blessed with unique skills, you can build your team, develop your champions, and raid your way. Did I mention champions? Because this game has a ton of cool champions. If it wasn't obvious by False Swipe's logo, I love sword characters. And I think the coolest looking champions in Raid are the Judge, who's got a sawtooth sword at the hilt, and Astrolon, who is an awesome looking angel knight with 2 swords. I will definitely be looking out for them via the tavern summons as I grind the game to get them. And this month is huge for Raid. They just released a brand new faction, the Sylvan Watchers, with some amazing new champions. Forest Elves, Ents, Druids, Fays, they're all here. And if that's not enough, Raid's got a full lineup of events, along with a new season of the Forge Pass, where you can get your hands on some of the most powerful gear the game has ever seen. Also, if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can get your exclusive rewards in Raid right now. And if you haven't started playing Raid yet, click my link in the description or scan my QR code here on screen and you'll get unique bonuses worth $30. We're talking a free epic champion, Rector Draft, 200k silver, 1 energy refill, and 1 XP boost and 1 ancient shard. So you can summon awesome champions as soon as you get in game. All of this treasure will be waiting for you right here. The 3rd generation of OU isn't the only one with a viable base Charizard, but it is the only one in singles where base Charizard is so good and widely used in the main metagame so as to earn the status of a genuine OU Pokemon. With its Meteor Mash resistance, Earthquake immunity, and Stab Fire Blast, Charizard possesses a nearly entirely unique ability to not just switch into Metagross, but to instantly threaten it with a one-hit KO in return. There was one Pokemon in OU to share this trait, Moltres, and Moltres was far stronger than Zard, at least initially. However, unlike Moltres, Charizard actually liked taking damage from Metagross because it got closer to 33% health, at which point its Blaze ability would be activated, and its Fire Stab would become far more powerful than Moltres. Charizard also packed much better speed than Moltres with the tier's Golden Standard Base 100, giving it far more opportunity to fire off its powerful attacks. Furthermore, though it lacked Moltres' Will-O-Wisp, Charizard's offensive move pool was the far more threatening of the two. With Dragon Claw, it could instantly threaten Salamence, Flygon, and even Kingdra, the former two even more efficiently because of that superior speed, while not needing to run HP Ice, instead maintaining the HP Grass that blasted through Swampert, and reliably stung Tyranitar and other waters. With Focus Punch, it blasted through Rest Snorlax, Tyranitar, and Blissey, while with Beat Up, it smashed through Blissey even more easily. Being a fire type, it naturally destroyed Skarmory, but to do so while also devouring Skarm's ever-present partner, Blissey, made Charizard one of the most fearsome wall breakers in the tier, and unlike the Blaziken that it shared this trait with, Charizard feared nothing from Spikes or Dugtrail's Arena Trap, to say nothing of its far better speed. As a result, with its standard leftover wall breaking sets, Charizard posed an enormous threat to the best, most defining team style in Advance. However, that wasn't the only set Charizard could run. Though it thrived in the sand which nullified the leftovers of several key opponents like Blissey and Snorlax, Charizard could also change the weather on certain teams. And what a set it did so with! It didn't just set up Sunny Day to to make its fire move stronger, it went further. It paired Sunny Day with Substitute, weakening itself purposely to get down into not just Blaze range, but to strengthen itself even further with Pataya Berry. With all three of those boosts in tow, Charizard was obscenely powerful. Sometimes it went so far as to use Overheat or even Blast Burn in its fourth move slot, giving it solid odds to achieve stupefying feats like one-hit KOing Blissey, with Blast Burn even having a chance against Suicune. However, it was the Leftovers wall-breaking set that launched Charizard into a bona fide piece of OU that players had to respect and count on facing consistently, lest it reduce them to ashes. Many a meme has been made about Charizard's malignant quadruple weakness to Stealth Rock, about how it completely ruined its viability. It is especially impressive then that Charizard was the single best Pokemon in Generation 5 NU in spite of this weakness. The tier's only source of Rapid Spin was Wartortle, which was generally not at all a good Pokemon. But for how excellent Charizard was, it was worth making the effort. However, you could also run good Pokemon instead of Wartortle, which is what most players did, because Charizard was so good that it dominated even with rocks digging into it. Of course, many Charizard teams employ methods of Stealth Rock prevention, early taunt sleep, choice band Sock whose mode breaker allowed it to break past sturdy Golem, or even just leading with Charizard or switching it in before rocks were up. However, even if rocks went up, Charizard still regularly dished out destruction. A Charizard that switched in just twice was still the scariest thing you could see, especially since the second switch into rocks would drop it into Blaze range. If those early Stealth Rock prevention tactics worked, and Charizard got just one more switch, that was absolutely game-changing. Most teams could barely survive 2 assaults from Charizard, let alone 3. With just Fire Blast, Air Slash, and Hidden Power Grass coming off of its great special attack and backed by its speed stat that placed it above the majority of the tier, Charizard was nigh unstoppable once it switched in. And with Focus Blast, it shattered even the closest thing to a counter it had, Regirock. Especially with the extra push of super effective damage it received from Expert Belt. It was nearly impossible to avoid losing a Pokemon to Charizard once it was in. You'd have to force it out with a faster Revenge Killer, none of which could safely switch in to begin with, and let rocks take their toll. Even when irreconcilably plagued by Stealth Rock, Charizard didn't just manage, didn't just excel, but thrive, to the point of being the single best Pokemon in Gen 5 NU. Of the 2 Mega Forms bestowed upon Charizard in Gen 6, nope, no favoritism there at all. X was the one that stirred greater fear in the player base. As terrifying as Y was with Pursuit support, X was nearly unstoppable with very little support at all. Zard Y could at least be revenge killed. After a speed boost from Dragon Dance, Zard X was not just powerful enough to destroy nearly everything, but fast enough to outrun nearly everything too. Being a physical attacker with a stab move super effective against Skarmory was absolutely incredible, but when many teams' best physical checks were the Dragon Weak tank Garchomp or a bulkless Scarf Landorus Therian, Zard X often devoured entire teams after a boost. Its incredible Dragon Fire stab combination not only had nearly perfect neutral coverage, resisted only by Heatran and Diancie, but was also immensely powerful thanks to its high attack and the built-in Life Orb boost it got from its Tough Claws ability. Its strength ensured most neutral targets, even those with good bulk, got utterly shredded. Even something like Specially Defensive Gliscor, a Pokemon with amazing natural physical bulk, was eviscerated by a +1 Flare Blitz, and of course Zard X hit a great amount of Pokemon super effectively too. Zard X could expand its reach with Earthquake, of course making its Heatran issues a thing of the past while slamming Tyranitar and Volcarona harder too. Sometimes it even slotted in over Dragon Claw, since nobody in their right minds would try to check Zard X with Garchomp or a Laddie-twin until it had already destroyed several Pokemon and the game was as good as one anyway. While it could run both moves, Zard X generally loved running Roost. It was especially ruinous on predicted switches, where the opponent would switch to a Fire Resist to try and rack up Flare Blitz recoil, and completely ruin Bisharp's Sucker Punch, the only common priority move that could do even decent damage to Zard X. This quality made it even more of a threat to offense. Of course, Zard X had another major advantage over its Y counterpart. Its regular Stealth Rock weakness as opposed to the Quadruple one made it far more dangerous even if rocks were still up, which was often the case in a metagame as lacking in reliable hazard removal as Gen 6 OU, and which was an enormous thorn in Zard Y's side. Of course, Zard Y was still quite popular, but even this worked in Zard X's favor. It was incredibly easy to compose a team where Team Preview would suggest Y. Then on the turn Zard Mega Evolved, the opponent would state in horror as their laddie looking to absorb a drought boosted Fire Blast would instead get Dragon Clawed into dust. Zard X's power was immense and was considered by many to be the most broken Pokemon at the end of XY, with many clamoring for its ban. This Zard X paranoia carried over well into ORAS. It was far and away the biggest reason why Hippowdon was as popular as it was. There is much debate over which of the two Megazards was more impactful on Gen 6 OU, but for our money, the fact reputable players actually wanted to ban Zard X says it all. Yes, Generation 7 added Toxapex, an amazing counter to Mega Charizard Y, but it also added so much more that allowed Zard Y to be fully unleashed. With new fairy types running around everywhere, Zard Y outrunning and destroying 4 of them in Magearna and 3 of the Tapus, with the 4th Tapu Koko being faster but wanting no part of its attacks either. It was in prime position to tear through everything, possessing an amazing matchup against a huge number of popular teams through the sheer number of commonly paired Pokemon it obliterated. It had flexibility in its moveset too. With how strong Sunny Fire Blast was, it could muscle through the likes of Tapu Fini with sheer power, so it sometimes dropped Solar Beam in favor of Hidden Power Ice to smash the Zygarde and Garchomp. Speaking of Tapu Fini, it was Zard Y's new best friend, finally a reliable defogging teammate. Yes, Toxapex was irritating, but early in Sun and Moon, Zard Y paired with Dugtrio for easy removal, and even after Dugtrio's ban, all it took was pairing Zard Y with Pokemon that abused Toxapex's presence to create win-win scenarios. The general idea was either you faced Toxapex and abused it with another Pokemon, or you didn't and Zard Y went berserk. This was especially popular in Ultra Sun and Moon, where Zard Y's Sun enabled its teammate Heatran, who was no longer wallable by Gliscor. Speaking of Ultra Sun and Moon, that buffed Zard Y even more because Defog was given to a ton of amazing Pokemon like Kartana, Landorus and Tornadus, making clearing rocks for Zard Y even easier. The popularity of Tornadus T was especially beneficial for Zard Y since it was another popular Pokemon that Zard Y absolutely destroyed. So while already massively threatening before, metagame shifts meant Zard Y really came into its own in Gen 7. Now, next on this list is obviously the #1 Charizard of all time, but it'd be a shame to list just 5 Charizards. You can never have enough Charizard after all. So here are even more Charizards. These honorary Charizards weren't quite top 5 material, but were excellent in their own right. We've already touched on how terrifying Gen 6 OU Megazard could be, as its ferocity was difficult to withstand for many teams and was often used to check itself. On the flip side, Megazard X was highly dangerous in Gen 7 OU as well. It particularly enjoyed the support of Tapu Bulu's grassy terrain for passive healing and the weakening of opposing earthquakes, making it even scarier, while also bowling over common team structures with little difficulty. Megazard Y for both Gen 6 and Gen 7 VGC was a metagame threat for the non-Uber years and had a ton of notable placements. It certainly loved to summon Drought to facilitate its teammates or its own fire moves. Gen 4 Charizard was also the king of NU and was similarly terrifying to its Gen 5 counterpart. In Gen 2 OU, Charizard used a belly drum set that with proper support could very quickly spiral out of control and sweep almost at a moment's notice. Finally, in Gen 8 OU, Solar Power Choice Specs Charizard destroyed absolutely everything, 2-hit KOing even Blissey with Weather Ball. And to spice things up a little more before we get to the #1 Charizard of all time, we'll also include the worst Charizard of all time. In Generation 5, Solar Power tricked less experienced players into thinking it was worthwhile on Sun teams. In OU, right? Well, yes, but also in Ubers. Though it had absolutely no competitive merit in the tier, Charizard's fan favorite status, one it often shared with box cover legendaries not allowed in OU, ensured it was constantly one of the most popular Pokemon on the Generation 5 Ubers ladder. It was more popular than several Pokemon that were actually good. Now, the players using it were of course none too successful, but that didn't stop them. Gen 5 Ubers Charizard, for players who don't like using Ho-Oh, or players that don't like winning. How do you get more Charizard without creating multiple Charizards? You take one Charizard and make it enormous, of course. Yes, Gigantamax Charizard is both the biggest and best Charizard of all time. The latter distinction earned via its spectacular, defining VGC performances throughout Generation 8, across the span of multiple years and formats, and especially in the final format of the generation being Series 12. We simply could not put it anywhere else besides #1 because of the sheer amount amount of top cut appearances it had throughout Gen 8. Over 260 plus notable placements, with a good amount of them being top 8 or even top 3 once Series 12 hit. Charizard was already a VGC force in the limited early metagame before it gained access to its Gigantamax form. It reveled in spamming heat waves boosted by sun and solar power, as enabled by its partners Torkoal, Whimsicott, and Friend. It became even scarier when it Dynamaxed, as it could use Solar Beam's valuable grass coverage as max overgrowth even if sun wasn't active. This was back when solar power and Gmax were illegal together. Post Dallas Regionals with Aaron Traylor's win though, Charizard Gigantamax ascended to its highest level and showed why Gmax was more valuable than solar power. Gmax Wildfire was utterly absurd. Its natural strength was already a 3rd degree Scorcher with a blast burn matching base power of 150, bolstered further by sun and when it was finally legal, solar power. But the move's excellent went beyond its double targeted sun field destruction via direct damage. It also chipped both opponents for approximately 16% per turn for 4 turns. That's Rocky Helmet chip damage for reference. And it did so for all 4 turns even if Charizard was KO'd beforehand. Gigantamax Charizard was already a decent, successful Pokemon in VGC with Torkoal as its sunsetting partner, despite their redundant typing's potential susceptibility to exploitation. But when Groudon was allowed a few series later, and also it gets to solar power, forget it. As if Gmax Zard needed any more enabling for the utterly stratospheric damage it was dishing out. It hit so hard it was almost incomprehensible. With Life Orb added to its repertoire, it one-hit KO'd Rotom Heat through its resistance. Mind-boggling levels of damage. Charizard's uses and success were off the charts. Its metagame impact was such that it began running Ancient Power of all moves just for other Charizard. It doesn't get much more insane than that. Gigantamax Charizard placed highly in tournament after tournament after tournament and finished off Sword and Shield with a 2nd place finish at Worlds thanks to Guillermo Castilla Diaz. You get the picture. Gmax Charizard's insane strength and achievements make it the most competitively accomplished Charizard of all time. Despite the fun we have poked at Game Freak with this video's introduction and even its concept, that concept is actually quite interesting and potentially one worth revisiting for other highly successful Pokemon. We of course cover competitive histories of Pokemon in the How Good Was Actually series, and sometimes it's clear when a Pokemon has peaked, but in the case of Pokemon who have been so good so many times, it is intriguing to attempt to dissect and rank where they have been at their most excellent, impactful, and successful. For example, which generation has Heatran been at its best? The process of discovery itself is intriguing and revealing. So in the comments, let us know if you agree with our rankings of the Charizards and why, and perhaps we'll return to this format again in the future. Thanks for watching, everyone, and as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content, and thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos, and thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.